What's going on, guys? It's Wednesday night again, and here we are at Squadron Live. I appreciate you being here. Looking forward to this show this evening. Got a longtime friend of mine, Chris Decker, going to be joining us here shortly and talk about the good old days of ship modeling. And so I'm looking forward to that. We'll see what he's been into lately. And first, let's check out who's with us tonight. I'm going to jump through this real quick so we can bring Chris in and get started on tonight's topic. But Jason, it's good to see you tonight as always, buddy. And got you a side project going for Chattanooga. That's awesome. I'm starting to get pretty excited about the Chattanooga show. It's for the first time ever. It's my home show. So glad to be here. Can't wait to be there, and looking forward to it for sure. Let's see. Carlos is with us tonight. Good to see you tonight. And Derek. Let's see. Danny, you finally got your hot sauce. Awesome. I'm glad they did finally come in, and I have been enjoying them myself. The B17, I think, might be my favorite. I like all of them. We got 5 of them. Let's see. You got your P51 sauce. You got which is cayenne. The B17, which is the Nagajalokia. Oh, there's the camera. Sauce. The B24 Liberator, which is your habanero. Let's see, what else do we have? I'm sorry, that was ghost pepper. The habanero is the B25. Very cool. And of course, the B29 is your Carolina Reaper. And it's neat. It's fun stuff. And just like we find ourselves a lot of times buying a model kit just for the box art, that's what this hot sauce is for me. This box art, so to speak, or bottle art, I guess. Peter did it for us, and it just looks really cool. I've got a little hot sauce collection back here myself, and these really add to that. And on top of it, it's good to eat. So glad you're enjoying it, Danny, and hope the rest of you guys that bought it from us are as well. I was just telling the guys backstage before we got started that the other day when the hot sauce came in, it came in a little late in the day, so everybody else had left, and I went ahead and pulled the pre-orders for the hot sauce. So we had hot sauce everywhere in the shipping room, staged to ship out the next day, which there's usually orders staged in the shipping room to ship out the next day, but usually it's model kits and books and photo etch and paint. So the next morning, everybody came in, and the shippers go in the room. There's hot sauce everywhere to be shipped, and it's funny to me. You might wonder why I'm laughing. You would have had to have been there. It was just a funny moment because, you know. Anyway, back to this. Good to see you tonight, Randy. And looks like you're working on another book tonight. That's good. Rex, good to see you. And David, let's see. Ken, good to see you tonight, buddy. David and Ed. And some of you guys, I'm saying hello twice, but I guess that's all right. Good to see you tonight, Jeff. And you guys talking about snow up there and 29 degrees and 18 degrees. Yeah, we don't have any of that down here yet. That's it's just not a problem to me. I like cooler weather, but you guys can have the snow and the really cold temperatures. David asking about restocks on pit road stuff. So same song and dance I've been saying a long time. We've been waiting on our warehouse to get finished and blah, blah, blah. You've heard me say it, but that's finally done now. And I am very happy to say that products from Japan, not just Pit Road, but several manufacturers from Japan, they've been waiting on us to get ready at our new place, to have space. We're finally ready, so we've cut all that loose. And sometime around the first of the year is when stuff from Japan will start showing up. And in the case of Pit Road, showing back up for the first time in a long time. And assuming they still produce that Commencement Bay, that is one of their resin kits, we will absolutely be getting those. It's an excellent kit. So I'm looking forward to having those back in as soon as possible. Good to see you tonight, Lee and TD. And Ed, I saw your message here earlier before we got started about the planes. And yes, we will double check those. The interesting thing about the Black Cat 350 scale aircraft, or all of his aircraft, but the 350 scale planes that are so nice, if I've got the prices wrong, it won't surprise me because he offers them in single packs, 3 packs, 6 packs, 10 packs, and sometimes we might get the prices mixed up. So we'll double check those and make sure that whatever quantity packs we are offering, that we have them correctly priced. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. And we've already made a note of that, and we'll get it checked on tomorrow. Let's see. Lawn Care Novice, good to see you tonight, buddy. Wayne is with us tonight, and Frank coming to us again over from Australia. Good to see you tonight, buddy. Or well, I guess in your case this morning. And Frank, it is party time indeed, buddy. Let's see. We're going to wrap this up real quick so I can bring Chris in here. But Ken is already talking on topic tonight. Do you have any of the Midship Models destroyers? And those were, that's definitely part of what we're going to jump into here shortly. I'm glad you've got those, Ken. They were nice kits, and I'm sure Chris is going to tell us all about how that came to be. So, see, scrolling right down through here, see a few more of you guys. I don't want to leave anybody out, but hey, John, good to see you. And Kimberly, good to see you tonight. And Kenneth over in our old stomping grounds over in Blairsville, good to see you. Let's see, John Cooper, first time with us, coming to us from Facebook. Good to see you tonight, John. Thanks for joining us. Mike's with us tonight. Rich and Brian. A lot of you guys are here tonight. So I really appreciate everybody being here. I don't want to leave anybody out, but we do have a lot to cover tonight. It's going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to it. And so a lot of you guys, you might know, you might not know. So Squadron now, I'm the owner, I'm Brandon. But before I was with Squadron, I was with Free Time Hobbies. And my dad, Russ Lowe, and I started Free Time Hobbies back in 2006. But we didn't start from scratch, so to speak. We actually started by buying another internet hobby store, and that store was Trident Hobbies. And Trident Hobbies was started by a man named Chris Decker, and that is who I have with us tonight. So I'm going to bring him on stage with us. Chris, good to see you tonight, buddy. How are you?
Hey, fantastic. Great to be here. I think that's the best green room I've ever been in. So appreciate it.
Well, you know.
Only the best.
So going back to 2006 is when we bought Trident Hobbies from you.
Right.
And as you guys may have seen on the thumbnail or in the description of this video, Chris also had two other companies or two other brands that he ran called Midship Models and Yankee Modelworks. So these three companies kind of all coexisted. Trident Hobbies was your retail site where you sold stuff. Yankee Modelworks was your 350th scale resin ships that you manufactured and sold through Trident and other outlets. Midship Models, of course, being your 700 scale brand. So we kind of came on the picture in 06, bought Trident Hobbies, and then you continued running manufacturing. We were one of your dealers. But I want to back up before that, before we got involved and kind of knew what was going on. Take us way back to how, first of all, why were you interested in getting into this industry? What led you into doing that? And then how did you get into the industry and how did you get started?
Oh, yeah. Well, great question. So Trident was actually birthed from Nauticus Models, which we started back in, actually it was 1999. So the late winter of 1999 was the first time we started selling plastic models. My background is you and I have talked many times. So I went to school out of college for ship design. So I have a naval architecture, marine engineering degree. So I've always been fascinated with ships. Middle school, high school, I built ships, shot them up with BB guns like most kids back then, and rebuilt them, and always had an affinity for plastic models and building ships. So led that to what I thought was going to be my career in shipbuilding. So went through that, got my degree in 95, I guess, and then met my wife in college. So we got married and decided to live in Boston. And if anybody who knows anything about shipbuilding, there's no shipbuilding in Boston. So I had to pivot on my career and ended up going to work for a software company. relatively small company back then called Parametric Technology Corporation.
Okay.
Which, if anybody recognizes, that's amazing, but it's now known today as PTC. And PTC was the leading provider of 3D CAD modeling tools. So we would support companies around the world building, John Deere tractors. The Airbus A380 was designed in Pro Engineer. Lots of things you use every day were designed in Pro Engineer. And for 6 years, I learned how to be proficient in 3D modeling back in, again, this would have been late 90s, early 2000s. So when the next step in my personal development was getting a master's degree. So I started going to business school, and they kept having you do case studies, do a case study of this, case study this. And, I don't like doing work for no gain. So I was like, if I'm going to do all these case studies on how to start a business, I'm going to start a business. So that's how the business first started. I had some old plastic models from my high school days in the basement, put them on eBay and sold them for pretty much retail value at the time.
Okay.
So I was like, wait, this eBay thing's pretty easy. You list stuff, people buy it, you ship them to it, they pay you. I can make this work. So then the hardest thing was finding a distributor back then who would sell to someone who wasn't a brick and mortar. Internet, remember, this is, 98, 99 .com bubble years. And there's a lot of animosity towards internet only businesses, breaking in and destroying the brick and mortar guys. So I found one out in California. We started buying small and building up. And eventually, because of my background in shipbuilding, and loving ships, we just focused on ship modelers. And at the time, there was really two of us. It was us and Bill Gruner, Pacific Front. He started his mail order, and about the time our website was being developed, he was developing his own.
Okay. Yep.
So, yeah, this is wild west days of eBay and internet, where we could actually complete an auction and then drive people to a third-party website to check out, which you can't do these days. You'll get kicked off the platform. But we started bringing people over to the website and offering them upsales, additional models, paint kits, things like that.
Which at this point in time was Nauticus Models, right?
Yeah, this was Nauticus Models.
Okay.
And that was growing. I said, hey, I'm going to run some advertisements. I'm in the ships. I know all the ship magazines, the naval histories and the proceedings and the World War II. So I ran some full page ads selling ship models under Nauticus Models. That's when the state of Virginia took notice. We get a cease and desist letter from the state of Virginia, who owned the Nauticus gift shop, I guess, at the Battleship Museum there in Norfolk. And my wife's a trademark attorney, and she's like, we could probably fight and win because the trademarks are different, but it's little old us versus the state of Virginia. So we decided it was cheaper to rename the business. And then keeping in the theme, we narrowed it down to two choices. It was either Trident Hobbies or Not Hobbies, KNOT.
Okay.
So we went with Trident, and Trident was born. Well, you had the website there. Was it 2000?
Yeah. This was the from the Wayback Machine. This screenshot of your site. Hold on. No, this one. 2002, June 1st, 2002. This was your first page, according to the internet history sites.
No, I'm not.
And you're saying, welcome to Trident Hobbies, formerly Nauticus Models. So. The interesting thing about the Wayback Machine is it had record of Nauticus Models starting in, I think it said either 99 or 2000, but there was no screenshots of it to look at.
Yeah. I can tell you it didn't look much different from this because the Nauticus colors were that brown and maroon.
Right. Okay.
So it probably was this.
Right.
We just threw the new logo on and said, hey, now we're Trident.
Sure.
So now I'm still doing this part-time. It wasn't until 2004 that I took a package from PTC to leave the company, and I said, hey, I'm going to go run my business full time.
Right.
And so we did that. And shortly after that, for family reasons, we decided to move from Boston down to Charlotte, North Carolina. And it was like, because I was looking for a warehouse. This was running out of the basement in the garage of my house. And, we had lots of inventory. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen those old library shelves where you have to move a shelf to get to the next one. That's what my basement was like. I had all these chrome racks, and to get to chrome rack number 4, you had to move 3 of them out of the way to get to what was there.
Yeah, that's kind of like our warehouse has been lately. So you're at 2004 now.
Yep.
It probably didn't take you long to get your website looking like this. This is what I remember the Trident website looking like, these kind of color schemes and this layout. And tell us, what do you remember back then? We're looking here. Here's the Special Hobby U-boat, old Eastern Express kits, Hasegawa. Trumpeter had just started along that line, right? Tell us a little bit about what you remember. What was hot back then? What were some of the big brands, some of the big ship models? Because 350 scale had really just kind of started in the plastic world.
Yeah.
Right in there.
Yeah. Before, so this has been about 2002, 2003. 350 scale. If you guys go back and think about it, we had Tamiya with their 12 kits, and then we had ICM, the 2 German battle cruisers. And then we had Resin ships. I think there was probably a Titanic in there somewhere. But, you really had less than 20 350 scale plastic kits. And then we had Resin. I mean, we had, we would do good business with, was Blue Water Navy. We did a little bit of business with Iron Shipwrights, the Commander series. And we did, those kits were great because, as a small business, they were, the Tamiya kits, this, I always laugh at this. We were selling on eBay the Tamiya 350 kits for $50. I was buying a case of 6 of them for less than that, obviously. It's like $150, $160 for a case of 6 350 scale plastic kits. And selling them for $50. And, those were great. They'd move. And then we'd hit a Blue Water Navy battleship, $300-$400 sale. That would make the day. So you only had to pack and ship one thing. So,
right.
So we really started promoting the Resin ships because of the value and, quite frankly, the profitability and the limited availability.
Right.
And we were dealing with, I think Mike Bishop had Blue Water Navy at the time. Okay. And the guys at Commanders, Iron Shipwrights, were the 2. And a couple other little 700 scale IHP, Imperial Hobbies. I think he's still around. Jag, if you remember Jag. Jag was back then. And we did well with that. We did so well with it to the point that we're putting a little bit of strain on, these 1 to 2 person shops casting in their basement or their garage. I'm placing an order for, 50 kits, and they've never seen these size orders before. They didn't get them as frequently as we were giving them to them. And they were, there was a lot of delays, production delays. When are you going to get this?
Yeah.
So
see, and of course, this was a couple of years before we got started, but now just knowing what I know and knowing the history of the industry, that had to be a very interesting time as a ship modeler because, like you said, less than 20 plastic kits for under $100, but then all of a sudden you have virtually whatever you want in the resin market. I mean, I know
there's hundreds, right?
Yeah, I mean,
literally,
you've got all this stuff, and you're mentioning $300 and $400 battleships. That was kind of the normal back then because at the time, who would have thought? Fast forward 20 years, we've got we got what if battleships in plastic. Who would have ever thought? I mean, you had big aircraft carriers in resin back then too.
Oh yeah, those were like $800.
Yeah, so and that was normal for the resin market.
Yeah,
nobody thought twice about getting it because there was no other way, and we didn't think that there would ever be another way to get these kits.
Well, there hadn't been 350 scale plastic before that in those kits. Enterprises, Hornets, North Carolina battleships. These things weren't there. So, so we were doing that, and around that time, and I think it's even a little bit on that website, the historical website, we were struggling with the decision. I wanted to grow the business. Do we grow horizontally and add, aircraft and armor and all the other things, or do we look at growing vertically and try and do we get into manufacturing and distribution and just focus on ships, because that's what we really wanted to do.
I see. Real quick, look at this. I put Rob's comment up. He said we forgot about 350 scale Dragon kits. So I guess they had some.
Was there one? There was some subs.
Some of those earlier ones. So actually, next month's Dragon re-releases have the 350 scale Ohio, their 350th Ticonderoga, and their 350th Spruance and Kidd. So if any of them were back in that time, that would have been them, because those are some of their earliest 350 scale kits that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
All right. So did you say at this time, did you sell anything other than ships at all? Like, did you even try tanks or planes or cars or anything?
I think I tried a little bit. We probably placed an order from the distributors and got some in, but I didn't know what to buy. Right. I'd go to my sales rep and he'd sell me the 20 kits, the best sellers. Well, the problem was the 20 best sellers is what everybody had. So they weren't good sellers on eBay and on my website, that we didn't have traffic in those areas, because, people could go elsewhere to get them.
Right.
So it really drove us into becoming more vertical. And, go back a little bit to my 6+ years and having a license of this $30,000 software to do 3D design. I started designing some plastic kits. I'm like, hey, I want to produce, as part of this verticalization, let's start producing plastic ship models, which, I kind of think back on as like, who am I, this little guy sitting in my basement in Boston, designing 3D kits, plastic kits, of the likes of Tamiya. And this was even before Trumpeter was out. So we started designing, speccing out plastic kits and designing in 3D. And that's where really Midship Models started forming, back in that time frame. I don't remember the exact year, but I hope this isn't a bad memory, but some of you might remember the Admirals Club that we started, because we had to fund these things. So for me, the design was free because I knew how to design the kits. Pro Engineer had a plastic molding component, so we could actually, get the flow rates and the balancing, and everything was there. So we could design the kit. It was producing the molding, and this was, for a destroyer model, which is only 2 molds, we're looking at $25,000 back in, 2002, 2003. And I really wanted to do it in the US. So I went in it, finding someone with the skills to do it, in the US of that detail, 700 scale injection molded plastic, was very hard. I ended up finding a company. The owner and I kind of clicked. So he took on the project, and he kind of told me afterwards, was like, I didn't think we were going to make money on it, but I really wanted to do it. So I was like, that works for me. Or I thought it did. Problem was, he made one of the tools, the weapons sprue, and then he sold the business. And the new owners were like, well, we're not doing any projects that are losing money. So, they basically took my, I think it was like $15,000 deposit. It was like $15,000 and then $15,000 when they were done. They took the $15,000 deposit and said, that'll cover the, one mold complete, and you need another like $30,000 to do the second mold. And I was like, that's not going to work. So around that time, that's when Trumpeter started showing up on the scenes. And we started getting 350 scale kits from Trumpeter. They produced the Hornet, I think, was the first kit in 350 scale. Was it the Hornet or the Hood? I think it was the Hornet. No, it was the Hood. It was the Hood. And we sold enough of those to make people take notice. I mean, I think we had pre-orders for like 400 hoods. I remember, I wish I could find it. I had a photograph where we had unboxed as many as we could. Remember that 10-foot conference table that's been kicking right back and forth between us for all those years? I had that table filled with like 200 hood models. and we took a picture of and sent an email blast. It's like, hey, the hoods are here. We're starting to ship them. But, 400 hoods, the distributor at the time and Trumpeter took notice because, most people weren't buying that quantity. Stores are buying 1 or 2. The online guys would buy 12. For us to take 400 got us noticed. So at that point, I was actually coerced myself into a meeting with the people at Trumpeter. They were coming to the United States to meet with the importer, and I got to sit down with them. And this was, I wouldn't say it was Stevens, it was Mike Bass, who was the importer at the time. So I remember flying up to New Jersey. I put this beautiful PowerPoint presentation together, and sat in Mike Bass's office with a couple of the principals from Trumpeter and pitched this idea of partnering together to make 350 scale battleships. And we're going to do I actually have the paintings around here. We're going to do the Massachusetts and the South Dakota first. And I said, look, the trick is, the only way it's profitable is if we set like $120 retail price. And at the time, remember, Trumpeter 350 kits are going for $50, $60 retail. I think the ICM kits were $90 retail, but nobody was buying them, those 2 battle cruisers. And they just come out with the hood, and I think it was $100 or $120. It was like, if we can do battleships at this price, we can partner, do it together and produce kits. I guess the short version of that story is they did it without me. I like to think that meeting had some like reaffirmation. I mean, I gave them projected sales numbers, what we thought we could sell in the US and international, had all this business, I had the MBA, so I had it all thought out. It wasn't far off in hindsight from what I learned after the fact. But, I think that might have been a convincing point. They probably already decided to do it, but, it made them feel better, I guess, about the decision about entering 350 scale plastic. And at that point, they started popping them out left and right. So,
and have been for 20 years.
Yeah. I remember the Hornet was next, because that was the first time we had all the planes, and we sold more. I mean, obviously people would buy a Hornet and then they'd buy 4, 6, 8 boxes of planes to make the air wing. Cause it never came with a full set. So, yeah, this would have been, we'd moved down to Charlotte, 2004, 2005. Actually, as an aside, we ended up, the outcome of that partnership was the Midship Models. After my US guy failed, I went to Trumpeter, the contacts I had there. I'm like, hey, can you do this? And
you had the one mold from your US guy before he quit. Okay.
Yeah,
so you had a weapon sprue, but no hull sprue.
Right. I had the weapon sprue and a design for a hull sprue.
Okay.
And we actually had the mold. So I had a small guy with an injection molded shop in a barn behind his house in New Hampshire who ran the dickens out of that mold. I think the mold was designed for 10,000 shots. It was an aluminum mold. So it was 10,000 shots. I think at the end of the day, we got 30,000. And I apologize to anyone out there who got some of those last ones, but I think there was more flash than model in there. But then finally we just had to stop. It was hard and shift over to white metal and casting. That probably would have been about 2006. But yeah, we produced. So they agreed to produce the hulls, and so I sent the design over. Worked with their design team because they didn't like they liked the design, they didn't like the layout. So we had to go back and forth on the layout of the sprue.
Well, let me stop you real quick and tell everybody something, just in case you missed that. Everybody, we always talk about Trumpeter makes so many different brands. You got Trumpeter and Hobby Boss and Merit and all these different brands. Well, there you go. You just learned another brand that you probably didn't know was a Trumpeter brand.
Yep. They shot the plastic. It was interesting. At the end of the day, we tried to get the molds out of China. I don't want to fast forward too much, but when we were selling, when you guys got involved, we tried to get the molds out of China, and they don't have an export license for molds. They only have an export license for plastic. So
you can run them till the cows come home, but you can't have the molds.
Yeah. Probably, I don't know. I don't know if you ever call them up. Maybe they're there. You need to get a new weapon sprue, but you probably 3D print those now anyway.
Oh yeah.
So
all right. Well, that's cool. So of those two molds that you had, you got what, 6 or 8 different kits out of those,
Well,
if I remember? Or
we
no, a
got
couple of those were cruisers. That's a whole different ball game. But your destroyers, how many different destroyer kits did you end up with?
So we ended up getting, well, the destroyers, we ended up producing 8 destroyers.
Okay.
I mean, and I don't know why I keep saying we, it sounds royal. I'm the only one who did it. So I produced eight destroyer kits. We did the Benson. So the first 2 molds were the weapon sprue and the hull sprue for the Bensons. And we got 4 kits out of that. And I didn't know, I learned, but anybody who has all 4 kits, you'll recognize that they're exactly the same. The only difference is the instructions and the box art. So when we sold those, then I went and did, I was working with Pit Road a lot, importing a lot of their stuff, and they agreed to sell some plastic. So that's when we produced the cruisers, the Atlanta and the Cleveland, not the Atlanta, the Miami and the Cleveland, and the 2 destroyers. I forget which 2 destroyers, but the reboxed.
Wasn't it gearing?
Yeah, 2 reboxed gearings. And then we went ahead and produced the Mahan class, the other 1,500 tonners. And that one I learned, and we actually had 1 mold, but it was partitioned. So it was like a center sprue of the ship hull and 2 of the kits. And then it had 2 wing sprues for different kits. So a kit could be the center sprue. That was a complete kit. Then you could get a center sprue in the left wing. That was another kit. And then there was a center sprue in the right wing. So that was a 3rd kit. So, the thing I felt better about was we sold 4 different kits, but there was actually 4 different things in each box this time. So it wasn't just instructions and box art. But we're doing that, and we're getting more into resin. And, I think around that time, I don't remember the exact year, 2003, 2004. But Mike Bishop was entertaining ideas of selling Blue Water Navy. And I know I was talking to him, and my friend John Sheridan was talking to him. And what ended up happening was, John and I kind of partnered that he was going to buy Blue Water Navy, and he turned it into Yankee Modelworks. I think it would be one of the main corrections I give you is I don't think I ever actually, I didn't own Yankee Modelworks. I was associated with it a lot, but John pretty much owned that brand up till the end.
Okay.
And then at the end, I got it because I was able to give it to you. But so John took over Blue Water Navy as Yankee Modelworks, moved it up to New Bedford, Mass. And, I was probably one of his biggest distributors. So provided him a lot of support to be able to get that business transferred and moved and going. And that was probably 2004 because we worked together for a while. Went to my first Nats was in Phoenix, Arizona. That was 2004 as well.
Okay.
I shipped like 3 boxes of stuff, had the tiny little table. And I didn't regret ever going, but it was an overwhelming experience.
Okay.
So all these vendors with 10, 40, squadron sized tables, me with 1 table sitting next, I think I was actually sitting next to Steve Wiper at the time, the classic Warships guy, who's become a good friend over the years as well. So, so John and I worked together pretty well. And then we rolled around to 2005 Nats. And that's when I was talking with Steve, and I was trying to buy Steve's kits. I was begging Steve to sell me his classic Warship resin ships, the kits, so I could resell them.
And this is Steve, the same classic Warships that the books, the classic Warships books. This is the same Steve we're talking about.
Yep, same Steve. Okay. He would his argument was always, he liked writing books more than he liked casting resin. And he could barely keep up with Bill Gruner had him locked up with Pacific Front. Okay. So Bill Gruner was his exclusive seller.
Which is why Trident did not have classic Warships.
Right. That's why we didn't the resin kits. We had the books, but we never had the kits.
Okay.
So finally, at a moment of weakness, and this was at the 2005 Nats in Atlanta, so it was close to our hometown from Charlotte. I convinced Steve to sell me all of the masters in resin casting and all of his resin casting shop. It's like, you like doing books more than you like casting resin. Let me take all that, and then you can just do what you love, writing books. So, I guess Trident Hobbies bought out the classic Warship resin, and the plan was I was working with John. So the plan was we're going to bring it all together. The 700 scale stuff, we'd set up a casting shop in my warehouse in Charlotte, and then all the 350 stuff would go up to his shop in New Bedford. And we had some great plans. It was really good. And it almost worked. But then, so we got everything, flew out, John and I flew out to Phoenix, drove to Tucson. We probably flew out to Tucson, rented the 24-foot Penske truck, loaded up Steve's warehouse casting, 48-hour drive from Tucson to Charlotte, unloaded the 700 scale stuff, which we failed to pack correctly. It was all mixed up. So we basically had to unload the truck and then reload up all the 350 scale stuff and then drive it up to New Bedford, Mass, which was a 16-hour drive in a Penske truck, and unloaded everything up in New Bedford. And that's how the two brands came together. So we had, and we started re-releasing the classic stuff under the 700 scale stuff became Midship Models, and the 350 scale stuff became Yankee Modelworks. And we did, we both used the same brass supplier, so it was pretty easy. We could get the brass. I think John reworked some of the masters to, some of them had become dated, to bring them up to speed. But we started doing a lot of, partnering in that way. And that's really when we started really bringing in the 3D printing, which I know something you talked a lot about last week. There were a lot of people out there who were really good at building masters and carving masters and producing what was needed to build a 3D resin ship, or build a resin ship model. There was Mike Bishop was out there. John was good at it. There was John Ficklin was there. A couple other guys whose name escaped me. I apologize if you're out there and listening. I was not one of them. I could barely, draw a circle, let alone carve a hull. I mean, I could do it in the computer really well, but even the simple things of like square superstructures. I mean, if you think for a master, it has to be a perfect square. And the meticulous nature of that is when you're doing a master, it has to be slightly oversized because the resin shrinks. So to get a perfectly square block of superstructure out of MDF, the fiberboard we'd use, I mean, you had to be really good. Even just a square, let alone complex shapes, hulls and curved superstructures, smokestacks, stuff like that. You think about it. I mean, you touched on it last week, but the huge thing was the symmetry. I mean, ships are symmetrical. I could do it really well on a computer. And 3D printing was finally coming along where it was becoming practical. Not the way it is today, but for creating masters. We could pay someone, a ship master would cost thousands of dollars to have someone hand carve it and put it together. To 3D print computer designed masters would cost $1,000. Now you think about it, a 350 scale set of superstructure, which you can print at home now in your little EGOO printer. We're paying $1,000 for no detail blocks. So we bring those back, putty over the lines, because we weren't using paper back then. We were using like cardboard when you're building your layers of your print. It wasn't thin paper, it was cardboard. So you had all of the different the print lines, sand those out, put on all your photo etch details, put all your other details on there, and then you could start casting off of that. So that's where, I was always trying to do more, and trying to like speed up the process. And when you're dealing with, these guys who really are artists building masters, if you've ever worked with an artist, an interior designer, fashion designer, any type of artist, they kind of work at their own pace. So they don't work to production schedules.
Yeah. And that, what you just described, these artists doing what they do, You can imagine how long it takes, and like you said, literally thousands of dollars, and then you're going to make a rubber mold that you're going to be doing good
Yep.
to get 20 to 30 copies out of. And that is why those kits back then were so expensive, you know.
And we had to gamble a lot of times. I mean, people think we'd sell, thousands or hundreds of these kits. I mean, our break even point was usually like 50, and we didn't always hit 50 on a kit, or, we needed to do 50 in a reasonable amount of time.
Right.
6 months, 12 months. I mean, this is a small business. We didn't have a 3-year ROI on our molds. So, if you're trying to recoup thousands of dollars in cost, and then, resin production, I mean, that Montana you love so much, that was $120 of resin in every single hull.
Yeah, and how much rubber was it to make a set of molds for that thing?
To be honest, it wasn't that much, because that was one of the few kits that we actually built a box to put the mold in. The mold itself wasn't freestanding, so it was a little thinner.
I see.
And we had to do that because that was the only way we could get it to fit inside of the casting chamber, because we had like an 8-inch old pipe torpedo tube casting chamber that it was the only one long enough to put it in.
Right.
Because you do all this was pressure casting. And I remember, and those things would give off heat when they cured. And I remember one time we had tempered glass we'd put on top of the molds to give it, try and get as nice of a smooth, level surface as we could. And the first time we cast a lower hull of the Montana, we put it in there, left it overnight, came in the next morning. It had gotten so hot, it melted and shattered the tempered glass that was holding it down. This is like a 4-foot long piece of glass.
Wow.
Ruined the mold, ruined the resin, ruined the glass. Created some cleanup time. So there was a lot of trial and success, as we used to call it back then.
Well, so you've brought us up to 2006. Let me recap where we're at so far.
Yep.
So you start Nauticus Models, which turns into Trident Hobbies. You're selling ship models. You're battling against Bill Gruner.
Head to head.
Yeah, it's you guys. I mean, the Trident Hobbies and Pacific Front Hobbies, those were the two places to get your ship model fix.
Yep.
You start getting interested in doing some plastic kits. You meet up with this new company called Trumpeter. You start doing some work with them. You get some plastic kits. The next thing you know, you have the opportunity to go in together with John Sheridan. You buy Blue Water Navy. Yankee Modelworks is born. The next thing you know, Midship Models is producing 700 scale kits that used to be classic Warships. And now Yankee Models is the combination of classic Warships 350 kits and Blue Water Navy 350 scale kits. You got a lot going on. Now we're in 2006. I mean, how are you doing everything? You're doing retail, you're doing distribution, you're doing manufacturing. You see where I'm going with this. So
yeah. That was the point.
Bring us to 2006, middle of the year. What were you thinking?
2006, beginning of the year, my wonderful wife was telling me, I had 2 young children at this point. And they're like, they don't know you. You're spending 60, 70, 80 hours a week in the shop to get all of this done. We needed to find a way to scale back. And honestly, we were doing too much. Plastic kits, 700 scale kits, resin kits, brass, decals, upgrade kits. We needed to focus and retail, managing purchasing of retail. I mean, Russ can speak very well to what it takes to purchasing and dealing with different distributors and vendors. I had to pick something to focus on. And I really enjoyed the manufacturing more than the retail. So I decided that let's sell off the retail business. It had become big enough where I thought we could find someone who'd be willing to take it on and to support them, and also give us a little bit of a cash infusion so that we could really take the manufacturing to the next level.
Okay.
So that's when I hired Broker Bob, that you know very well. And we started, putting the shingle up to sell Trident. And I think you had the first interactions with Russ around that time. That would have been around April, May, June 2006.
Okay, and of course Russ Lowe is my dad, and it just so happens that poof, here he is. How are you, Dad?
Doing fine. Doing fine. Been listening to you guys talk about old times.
Old times.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us tonight. You're for anybody that's wondering, Dad is still in LJ. He has not made the move to Ringgold yet, so I don't see him near as often as I used to. But I actually did see you today. You came over to the warehouse today, so that was good.
Had to make sure you hadn't moved it on me again.
It ain't going anywhere, not anytime soon, except maybe up.
Second floor? Nice.
If you got to, right? I mean, you're talking, Chris, you're talking about you're just doing too much. You're doing this and that and this. And I'm sitting there hearing you say that, and I'm like, huh, that sounds familiar.
But you don't realize it because it's a labor of love. I mean, you don't it's like they say, it's not work if you enjoy doing it.
That is true.
So it wasn't ever work. It was just all consuming. And then, we were always on the precipice of the next big thing. So,
right.
Chasing the next big thing. So that's when Russ came along, and he probably has a little bit better memory of this than I do, because I was doing so many things, and he was retired, I think, at the time.
Yeah. So what you hear, Dad, you hear what Chris is talking about. He's looking for a buyer. He wants to get out from under doing retail. And at the time, you and I had been talking about starting a hobby business together. So I had a real job, as we call it in this industry, or at least I do. So I didn't have time to think about it much. My background, of course, was doing exactly what we do now in a different business, working for your brother, actually, selling canoes and kayaks on the internet. And Russ had just got done manufacturing real boats. So, I mean, things that float are all in common between the three of us in business. So, Dad, bring us up to speed on what you were thinking at the time and how you ended up connecting with Chris.
Well, I was doing exactly what Chris was doing, except in one-to-one scale. All the challenges you have tooling up scale models, if you're doing 20 and 30-foot pleasure boats, which we were building, all the same challenges. A couple more zeros in employees, and it was a good business. In 2005, I sold it. Turned to be a wonderful year to sell, because all of us remember what happened 2007, 2008. And in the real boat business, it dropped 80%. But I was gone. And so I was still in my late 40s then. And the very first morning, I remember that I didn't go to the boat plant. My wife walks up to me, and I don't even remember what she said, but she said, "As long as you're home," and all of you who are married can guess, it could have been anything. And I knew late 40s was too early to retire. So Brandon, I guess you were 20 at the time, I think, or thereabouts.
Yeah.
And
I had just turned 21.
Yeah. So I was selling big boats. My younger brother had started an internet business about 1999, Chris. I mean, he was early. And Brandon, you tell the story when Roger asked you to go to work for him.
Yep.
He said
it was actually 1996. He was one of the first 100 websites in existence.
Yeah. And he asked you what? To go to work for him selling boats on the internet.
And he said, "Do you want to learn how to sell on the internet with me?" And I said, "Sure. What's the internet?"
Yep.
This is it, 15 years old or however old I was.
Right. So anyway, so sold the business, can't retire. Brandon you'd left working for Roger, I believe, and went to work at my boat plant, even though I didn't own it anymore.
Yeah, I went after you sold. I didn't want to be the boss's kid, so after you sold it, I went to work there a month after you sold it, because I always wanted to work there, just wasn't going to work there while you. And of course, I had been working with Roger and doing that, and then I finally realized, I can go do something else, so I did.
Well, I knew I'm back at the house. retired trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. And I remember telling your mother, after a while, Brandon's going to get tired of working out in that boat plant compared to selling things on the internet, or at least I hoped you would, or figured you would. And you said, one day I said, well, I'm going to start a business. And you and I talked about it. And I said, well, let's do something fun. And because my hobby was model trains, we said, well, let's open an online hobby store, because you knew how to do the internet things. And I had some money from the sale to invest in a business. So we started shopping, and we lived in a little town in Americus. And I remember we even looked into like a Hobbytown USA hobby store. They said, well, that's great, but you can't open one in Americus, which I knew that it's much too small. And so we would have had to move. So we kind of ruled that out. And then we narrowed it down. There were 3 online businesses for sale. Chris's Trident, a company called Diecast Alley that sold diecast models, and then a remote control online store. We ruled out the remote control pretty quick. So it came down to diecast or model ships, but because Brandon and I had always been either real boats or canoes, and plus Chris's business was a little smaller and closer. It was in North Carolina, could go visit. And we decided, I'm going to go visit and see what's going on. So I drove up, and remember, I've just come from big tooling shops, and we were the same way. We were just getting into 3D modeling. And so we used to do all the hand tools and sanding, trying to get the 2 sides of a real boat the same. Oh, it's the same challenge. Yeah. And so the 3D had just come on, and we had just designed our first boat in CAD, and we're going to have it made when I sold the company. So anyway, I go up there, but I walk into your shop, and I remember there was nobody up front. There was like a reception area. You were probably out in the plant. So I walked in, and I remember looking over there, and there's this little table. And remember, I have no idea what a resin ship is at this moment, other than what I had read. And I wasn't there to look at that. We were looking at the retail side. And I looked there, and I wasn't sure if the next guy that walked out was going to be in a dentist outfit because of all the little tools, or I was going to see Geppetto walking out because he had just made Pinocchio in the back. And that was my impression, because I just didn't know anything. But went in there, saw everything familiar. The process was familiar, but in miniature. I mean, it was like a boat plant miniature.
Yeah.
So we talked. We decided. I went back home, told Brandon. I said, "Well, this will work." And we looked at what numbers we could, and we thought, "Well, I guess we got to stay in the boat business. So if we buy Trident and work that out," and it was really because it was ships and boats, and our connection is why we chose it. And again, the business model looked good. You had some good successes, and we were hopeful that we could build on that. And that's how we got into Free Time Hobbies. Brandon, I think you said we already had the name.
Yeah, we kind of decided on that name. We had decided that we wanted a hobby business. We liked the name Free Time Hobbies. So when we picked Trident Hobbies, we just, at the time, not knowing anything in the industry about good, bad, or indifferent, changing names of things, we're like, hey, let's call it Free Time Hobbies. And that's what we did.
Because we weren't sure that we would just stay into ships, because we didn't know.
Yeah.
I figured wanted
at the time we wanted to do trains. Yeah.
I just remember being crushed the day when I went to that website, and it was like, because then Trident redirected to Free Time. I'm like, well, what is this? Where'd my baby go?
Well, we did the same thing a few months ago when we took the Free Time Hobbies website down, and it now redirects to Squadron.
Yeah.
So, all right. So now, Chris, you have sold Trident Hobbies, the retail site, and all you've got to worry about is manufacturing resin ship models. So now what are you doing?
Yeah. So one of the other things we decided was I needed to go get that real job. So, so I went and worked full time for a company in Charlotte, and we had a team. So we had a model maker and we had a casting team who would do production during the day. And I focused on, working with, a few people left doing masters, but mostly on, the 3D designing. This would have been, late 2007, 2008. It's really when we got into 3D printing the masters, adding, taking the classic Warships kits, which were great bases, but we redid all the superstructures with 3D printing, detailing them up and when we re-released it as Midships. There were very few classic kits we actually just re-released as was. It was upgrading kits and modifying, and can we get sister ships out with minor modifications? How do we expand the line? Because at the time, we had a pretty good distribution network where, with a 700 scale kit, we'd announce a new kit and I'd get distributors and try to, in free time, place orders for 200 or 300 kits. So our focus was, new. The more new stuff we'd get reorders from time to time, but new kits were really driving the business. So it was, modifying the superstructures. 3D printing really allowed us to speed things up a bit, because we could do, I'd spend a couple $100 on 3D printing, but we'd batch out it would be a wafer, maybe 5 by 7 inches or 6 by 9 inches, and you'd cram that thing with parts. You get 5 or 6 kits worth of parts. So we'd run the 3D printing 2-3 times a year and have production kits going out. And we really, I think people will recall at the time, we were really expanding the 700 scale kits. John had started designing some kits in, he started doing CAD. We started upgrading all the instructions to CAD, because once you design the kits in the computer, it's really easy to build out the instructions because you already have the 3D models. And we started doing I think the Salem was done and was one of the few 100% 3D. I think we had the hull, because if I remember, the Salem was a Baltimore class, and we had a Baltimore hull, and we built off of it. Probably did a modified Cleveland. Really started doing 3D printing, and then really got into the dream kit, my dream kit, which turned into your dream kit, the Montana. The hull of the Montana is the only thing that wasn't 3D printed. So that was too big to 3D print back then.
Right.
But actually came across all the 3D files for the Montana superstructure, especially when with Trumpeter coming out with one, and was Verifier came out with one. I was looking at my design, and I actually bought one on eBay because I didn't have one. So right. Comparing the kits, and it's like everybody has a slightly different interpretation, but it was a never built, so sure. No one's really wrong.
Right.
And then it was really pushing, trying to get new kits out. And that, as Russ kind of alluded to, 2007, 2008, rolling into 2009, things were starting to not be so good. One of our biggest distributors at the time was Squadron. And
I was going to ask you, because I remember us talking about, we were trying to catch Squadron. I don't know if we were even close, but we were trying to catch them.
I mean, they would order 100, you guys ordered 20 or 30. I mean, they were great orders. And it was always like, you're almost there, Russ. Bump it up a little. But we I don't want to get too much into it, but many years later, we learned a lot of what was going on at Squadron, because all of a sudden they went from buying 100, 150 kits a month. Actually, it was more than that. It was 100 of each kit. We released 3-4 kits. They were buying 300, 400, 500 kits a month from us, to suddenly nothing. And that, this again, 2007, 2008, some people may already know the stories of what was going on at the time, but that hurt. And at this point I was getting a little exhausted, working a full-time job and then running this at night. And I think that's where we kind of get up to the end of, it was time for me to, hang up my hat and ship models and sell off the rest of the manufacturing and go back to being a good corporate citizen and working with corporate America. So, but it was good. It was a lot of fun, and I'd like to think left a little mark on the industry over those years. So,
well, I think there was a lot to learn from everything you were doing, not just you, but all the other guys that were doing this, and some of them still doing this. And I mean, the subject matter that you guys, and in some cases, more specifically, the guys that predated you, Classic and Blue Water. I mean, these subjects. The old story is, whatever you guys made, that was on Trumpeter's hit list. Because at some point, after we got started, was it 2006 or 7 that we went to that first nationals, and we took. I mean, you guys have seen us at nationals. We kind of go overboard a little bit. Well, we did back then too. And I remember that first show. It was the last year of the Dragon Con.
Yep.
Was that Virginia?
And
we had so much Yankee Modelworks kits that we bought and took up there. I mean, I remember tables of just white boxes everywhere. And I remember one of the guys that was there. And
that was in Columbus. I know where you're going.
Okay, yeah, and you remember the guy. But anyway, this customer, he was just blown away. He's like, I have never seen this many resin kits all together in one spot in my life. And he bought a bunch of them.
You probably took every kit we had on the shelf.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember that right there through those couple of years. But it was probably in your heyday. I mean, you had just got rid of the retail. You had somebody running your shop, so you could just make stuff. You had somebody, us, just to buy it, and obviously Squadron at the time buying a heck of a lot more. So, right through there, you had a lot going on. But then, a year or two before that, Trumpeter starts making kits. So I remember, Dad, when we went up there to buy Trident and load everything up, I remember the Hornet kit because it had just come out, and you had a monster stack of them that y'all were and you made it very clear to us. You said, those are not yours. Those are mine. Those are the last thing that get to go on my records is me selling it. But that was a resin kit killer. And then they kept
it was, but we learned. I mean, I want to bring this up. I mean, one of the things I want to say is like, I didn't do this alone. I mean, there were very few things other than designing the plastic kits. There was John, there was Mike, there's Steve, John Sheridan, Mike Bishop, Steve Wiper. We were all partners in this. So I certainly don't want to make it seem like, I'm creating. I mean, I was just the only thing I can say that I did differently was I finally got to the point where we had a dedicated team of full-time production people.
Right.
So that was the big differentiator with, my stewardship of the brands and that's where you're able to get tables and tables worth of stuff. Finally 3 years later, we solved the manufacturing problem of resin kits, only to, lose the demand.
Yeah. And that was my point with the Trumpeter kits back in the 90s, early 2000s. I saw somebody made a comment in the live chat talking about $800 for a resin kit, and that is a lot, and that's not for everybody. But there was some people that was the only way you were going to get that. And he made the point he can scratch build, and that is true. Some people can. But, you had all these kits, but then you start getting into 2004, 5, 6. There's this new Trumpeter company that's consistently putting out 350 kits, and all of a sudden you think, wow, well, maybe they'll make an Alabama and I don't have to spend $400 on it.
That was where I was going with that. So what would happen for us, and we would see it, is as soon as a rumor on whatever form would come out, the Trumpeter might do that, which those happen very recently. The Devastator from 2005, how long did that take? So as soon as that rumor hit, our sales would just tank on that particular kit.
On the resin kit.
because they were afraid as soon as I spend $400 on a battleship, there'll be $120 plastic, which maybe I'd rather work on anyway, and especially if it's 1/2 or 1/3 the price. And so every time there was a rumor, there was one more ship that if you made it, it would be bad. If Iron Shipwrights made it, their sales would tank on that particular one. And that really hurt it. So it drove you to have to do new products. And that was what killed it when the fella that bought it from you, because the main thing he couldn't do is figure out what the new kits were.
Yeah.
I mean, production, the plant was still running. And if I ordered what you already had, order a Montana, it was no problem. The people that were still at the factory, they'd make it, ship it, we'd sell it. But the new stuff, that there was no more after you sold.
I mean, I tried to work with them to get the new stuff, but at this point, we were moving to Atlanta. It really was becoming more challenging. But the one thing I would go back to say is we learned pretty quickly. We actually started getting excited because when trumpeters started copying our kits, and we know for a fact that they were copying our kits because there were things that the person who made the kit took assumptions on, took liberties on, was not in any reference material, and those things are in the kit. So we know they copied the kit. We actually tracked back where they got the kits from, but that's I actually thank them in hindsight, because what would happen is they'd come out with the Massachusetts kit, and trumpeter kits back then were not as good as they are now. They're pretty good, but they'd put a trumpeter kit out for $120, and then we'd come out with the resin upgrade kit and a couple different photo etch brass upgrades, and we would basically take all the really expensive parts of our kits, like the hull and a lot of the superstructure, and not have to make those. We could sell brass and we could sell all the detail parts, and we really were flourishing. There was one, we made more money selling Iowa class upgrades, or not Iowa, but South Dakota and Massachusetts upgrades than we ever did selling the actual kits. Because those were $80-$90, and we'd get, people would order. I mean, distributors would order those by a dozen. They'd order one Massachusetts, but then they'd order 24 upgrade kits, and then the photo etch brass, the 24 sets of photo etch brass, and those were easy to produce and kick out there. So
right now, I'll mention this too. So you sold the resin stuff, Yankee and Midship, in, I guess you said 2009, 2010, somewhere in there. But a lot of you guys that are watching this probably know that we ended up with that, and that's what became Blue Ridge Models. But we are actually not the ones who bought it from Chris in 2009 and 10. I think, Chris, you tried to sell it to us, but Dad, you didn't buy it from him, and so you take it.
I was afraid we'd end up like Chris at the time. We didn't. It was you and me, and maybe one other person. And I just didn't feel like that we could make that work. And as it turned out, the other guy paid Chris more than I probably would have. So that could have been part of it too.
Yeah, it was. Okay.
Well,
what? It all worked out in the end because you got it eventually.
It did. Yeah, that guy, I think he meant well, but I think he didn't exactly know what he was getting into, and it probably wasn't a year, less than 2 years, and he called us, and at that time we were ready. At that time we had already started Blue Ridge Models. We put our Fort Drum model out, and so we kind of knew what was the deal with resin, and we decided to buy it and changed, put all that stuff under the Blue Ridge Models line.
Change the name again.
Yeah, that's what we like to do, I guess.
The name of anything you bought?
No, I guess not.
Squadron.
Yeah, you kept the name of that. Squadron MMB. That's fair.
Won't be changing that. But well, that's great.
I think it was about 2 years.
Yeah.
And I remember Brick was his name, and he called us, and he was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I think his ace that was the employee from Chris, Jackie, I think she was thinking of leaving. And I mean, it had turned into, she was doing everything.
She was doing most of it when I was there. Then we give her help every now and then. So if I had lost touch because we'd gone to Atlanta. So
yeah, I think he was afraid that she might leave him, and it all just I think she may have turned in her notice, and he basically said, just come get it. And we struck a fair deal, and I wasn't sure what we were going to do with it. And I think Brandon got all of the resin casting out of his system after several months. I mean, it was
took
hard.
months.
I remember him going casting in the middle of the night. He'd work at the shop at day and then go down to, I guess it was Mike down there was helping you at the time, or
Mike
showing you around.
from Corsair Armada. He was he's a good friend, and that was before I was married, before I had 3 kids, and I could get off work, drive down to Atlanta, and hang out with Mike. He taught me everything I knew about casting, so he really helped me through those,
a lot about it,
through that learning experience. But
so that is truth. So when we first started the Blue Ridge, Brandon was very hands-on. He did learn it, and he learned it wasn't easy, for sure, but that was a good experience for him.
Well, and what we didn't know at the time is that within a decade that the industry would be changing drastically again, and I'm talking about 3D printing.
Yes.
Because by the you're talking about 3D printing masters with humongous build lines and have but at least you had your symmetrical shapes, and you had to add photo etch to them before you cast them, and all this stuff. A few years later, by the time we got it, we were actually 3D printing 100% of the master, very little photo etch having to be attached. But fast forward a few more years, now you're not just 3D printing masters, but just forget the whole casting thing, 3D print the part to sell it. So it's very interesting, taking a trip through this whole thing of how we get our little ship models.
So now, as far as resin ships, I'm trying to think. I mean, there's still a few that are out there with resin parts, but all the detail parts have switched to 3D, isn't it?
A lot of them have. I showed the Black Cat models last week. The hull is still resin cast. John Warnicke is still running Iron Shipwrights, and a lot of their hulls are still resin. Most of their hulls are still resin, but same thing that a lot of other companies have been doing. He's going back and redeveloping all of his small parts to be 3D printed. You got the small scale companies, 700 scale companies like Nico Models and AJM Models, and some of these that are still making traditionally resin casted.
They are still. I think they're still around, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these companies are still doing it. But
every time we get a new shipment, I'll usually get a note. Oh, by the way, this kit now has 3D printed detail parts included.
The latest one, Pontos models. They had been working. A lot of the Pontos upgrade sets include Veteran models resin parts. Well, Veteran and Pontos have worked together now. All of those Veteran resin parts are being upgraded. Everything's 3D printed now. So it's everybody's moving to the 3D print thing because not just the price and the quality, but the speed, the time, everything. It's just becoming easier.
Well, the scalability, you mentioned it last week. I mean, with resin casting, it's a hands-on process. I can only do one casting at a time, and it's timely. You had like 30 seconds to 2 minutes before the resin starts curing, so you got to work fast.
Right.
With 3D printing, once you get your design, you get a $300 Elegoo. I got it over here somewhere. Elegoo printer, and then if it works, I don't know, go buy another dozen of them. Scale up.
Yep.
So run them all night. You got a week's worth of production that you ran overnight, and you got to sleep through it.
There you go.
But no matter what material or medium is used to make it, the key is the design. I mean, that's the secret sauce. If you can do that, and I mean, I could probably figure out a way to buy something and get it to my machine if I could buy a 20 millimeter pet, but I can't develop one. And so all of
that's why I think you don't see very many people selling the designs. I mean, everybody's out there. Where can I download a 20 millimeter Bofors or a 40 millimeter or something like that? And that's where the work is gone. Like back in the day, there's no way you can buy a master. So, and that's what, your masters are now, the 3D files.
Right.
That's where people have spent all their time developing, and they're not going to put them up on a site to download for free somewhere.
Right. And there are sites that sell them, but in some of you guys listening, you might have a different experience than me. But I've bought designs and they're very good, but they are nothing compared to some of the guys like Ben Drill at Black Cat. You are not going to find his files for sale on some website somewhere. And now the guys that sell their files online, there's a lot of people that do it and they're really, really good. But some of these guys that spend the time to really dial those designs in, and they're printing them on their machines, because if you run a 3D printer, you can understand what I'm saying. Just because you have a file and you tell your machine to print it, that doesn't mean that it's going to give you the best result. There's a lot of you've got dozens of different types of resin. The temperature can affect it. Your FEP being perfect or not can affect it. All the settings and your layer thicknesses, all these things can affect it. Now, you might have your printer set up flawlessly and you might be getting excellent parts, but you might not be. But these guys, whether it's Black Cat or whether it's Larsenal, like Chris mentioned a minute ago, or whoever it is, these guys before that are selling ready to go products that we're buying, they're spending a lot of time and effort making sure those parts are coming off of their printers perfect, so that when we get the parts in our hand, we don't have to worry about that. So, you're always going to have people selling files. You're always going to have people selling prints. So it's just a matter of what would you like. Well, guys, I appreciate you coming on and taking a trip back through time with me. That was, I really like these history of the hobby videos, as I've been calling them, because there's just, it's not the same as it was. So it's fun seeing what we do now, where all this started and where it came from.
I wanted to say one thing in closing that's funny. I see Ed's Grooms in here tonight and posted it. And what was it, Brandon? You said that when we bought Trident Hobbies in 2006, that one of the first people to post, like, "Hey, good luck, new people," or whatever, was Ed Groom.
Yeah, Ed Groom was one of the first people that I met after we bought it. He and I found, when I was looking on the Wayback Machine, I found an old post on an old forum where somebody had announced that we had bought it from Chris, and I remember, and I saw Ed Groom was the first comment that basically said, "Good luck, guys." And then he probably said, "You're going to need it."
That wasn't on the post, but he probably thought it.
He probably thought
it. Yeah.
Ed has been a great friend all these years. A lot of you guys have. So that's my favorite part of this industry, is it's almost like a big family, and that's it's one of the cool things that I really, we talked about going to nationals, and that's the really cool thing about nationals for me is, Ed's always there, and so many of you other guys are always there, and it's a fun time. It's really nice. That's why I like doing this show on Wednesday nights. We all jump in here together, and it's always cool to see your guys' names pop up in the chat. It's like, oh yeah, he's here tonight. So
there you go. Well, thank you for having me, Brandon. I appreciate it. Chris, it's great to see you.
Yeah, sorry it took so long. I know we've been trying to do this for since you started the channel.
Well, we'll get together again sometime soon. Chris, you've got to come up, because a lot of you may know when we bought Squadron, Chris was involved with that too. So
that's a whole separate story.
That's
I don't know if we can do that in an hour.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story, and you'll have to come up for a visit. Maybe we can do that one in person, because that'll be a lot of fun to talk about.
I dug up the photos, so we'll have some photos of. I don't know how if you've ever seen a 50,000 square foot abandoned model warehouse. That's what I got photos of.
Yep. Yeah, Chris was actually the one that was physically at the auction. Well, guys, I'm gonna let you go, and then I'll close the show out, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
Thanks again.
Well, guys, that was fun. I hope you enjoyed taking a trip through time with me as a ship modeler. That's if if you're a ship modeler, you probably know a lot of those names, and it's like a blast from the past. Everything from Blue Water Navy and classic warships. We talked about John Ficklin. Of course, he was involved with Gulfstream and the Mike Bishop guy, the MB Models. So many brand names and things through those years. And of course, Bill Gruner with Pacific Front, that ended up being a part of our company's family, so to speak. And there was just so many names and products and things through the years that has over the years become a part of what is now Squadron. So it's really fun for me to go back and talk about these things. One thing, another part of the history of our company is, and this one is really cool to me. If you ever came to our store in Blue Ridge, you may remember the giant that used to stand out in front of our building called Mr. Hobby. Well, there's a story, there's a history of what that giant was. It wasn't just something we got and put up. It was built in the 1960s, and there is a guy out there named Joel Baker who runs a place called American Giants. And several years ago, we worked with him. He helped us get that giant. And he put together he came to our store, he interviewed Russ and myself, and he put together a very, very nice video. Well, he has given me the video to post on our YouTube channel. It's processing as we speak. Hopefully it will be ready in the next few days, hopefully by the weekend. And I'm going to post that, and I'd invite you to come look at that. It is a part of our company history, but it is totally different than any other part of the history. It's not a model kit company. It's really neat to see it's a piece of American history, because back before the days of the internet, really, when you're driving down the road, the only way to find out about a business is to get your attention. And these giants used to stand on the road. There was hundreds of them back then. There's still about 100 of them today that are left. And it's just a cool thing. So I'll have that posted soon. And I've got a lot of other parts of our company history lined up over the next few months that I'll be inviting guests on to talk about their part of it. So stay tuned for that. It'll be neat. And something else that I'm excited about, I'm starting to be able to do these fun things that I think are fun because we finally have the warehouse set up. So I'm jumping back into some of the things I'd like to do more frequently. And one of the things that I want to do, you saw a few months ago, I interviewed Valeria with ICM. I interviewed Alina with Mini Art. That was not the end of that. I want to do more. I want to do full company interviews. I've got Yuri and Freddie from Special Hobby will be joining me soon. So you'll get to hear all about Special Hobby and CMK, and he's got a very interesting history of that company. So that's going to be exciting. And the other thing that we're going to do in follow-ups to these full-length interviews is we're going to do short 10 to 20 minute videos, just basically updates. And this Friday, I've got Alina from Mini Art that I'll be spending 10 or 20 minutes with, and she's going to give us an update with what's going on with Mini Art, the new products. We've got a couple of their new kits coming in next week, and she's just going to kind of give us an update of what Mini Art's got going on. Valeria with ICM is going to be doing the same thing here in the next few days. She's going to give us an update about new ICM products that are coming. They're about to drop their 2025 catalog. They got some really cool announcements that she's going to make. And we're going to look at the flak bait. The B26 flak bait's going to be here next week, and she's got the sprues in hand. She's going to show us the differences between it and their first release. So just a lot of exciting stuff coming up, and I'm going to try to be posting more and more on our YouTube channel. So check that out. And don't forget our Black Friday sale that we've got going on, the Black Friday countdown, as I'm calling it. And we're adding just a few things in there each week or each day as we can, leading up to Black Friday. And you can imagine that the week of actual Black Friday, it might go in overdrive a little bit, but grab the stuff that's there now, because once it's gone, it's gone. So much to think about right now. Paintings, Lee Leibold's paintings, the Don Greer. I keep adding those in. Keep an eye on that. You might find one that just really has to hang up on your model room wall. So just so much cool stuff. I don't know. I guess I'll let you go for now. Whatever else I think about, I'll put in my email Friday. Join me next Wednesday night, 9 o'clock for Wednesday Night Live. At this point, I have no clue what we're going to be talking about, but I know it's going to be fun because you guys are going to be here with me. So you guys take it easy, and I will see you next week. Have a good evening.